Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Christopher Amick, and I'll be your host for today's episode. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, Nick, Leach, or myself invite one member of the Cinema Club to be the co-host for the episode, who will choose a movie and join Nick or myself on the podcast to talk about that film. Today, we are covering the 2018 film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. This film runs just under 2 hours, and a Rotten Tomato boasts a 94% audience score and a rare 97% critic score. The film received widespread praise from critics for its animation, characters, story, voice acting, and humor. The film won Best Animated Feature at the 91st Academy Awards, being the first non-Disney or Pixar film to win the award since Rango in 2011. With all that being said, let's get into it.
My name is Peter Parker. I'm pretty sure you know the rest. I saved the city, fell in love, then I saved the city again and again and again. Look, I'm a comic book, a cereal, I did a Christmas album, and a so-so popsicle. But this isn't about me. Not anymore.
Spider-Man swings in once a day, zip-zap-zop in his little mask and answers to no one. I love you, Miles.
Yeah, I know that.
You gotta say I love you back.
Dad, are you serious?
I wanna hear it.
Look at this place.
Dad, I love you.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Miles Morales. I'm the one and only Spider-Man. At least that's what I thought.
You ever hear of the Super Collider? You're gonna love this.
Dimension opening now.
You're like me.
That's impossible.
All right, kid, listen up. This fry is your universe. It's soggy, it's weird, it's gross. And this delicious normal fry is my universe. So you want to learn to be Spider-Man?
Can you teach me?
Yes, I can. Time to swing. Good, you're doing it. Double tap to release and whip it out again.
Okay.
Whip.
And release.
You're a natural. Whip.
Hey guys,
Who are you?
I'm Gwen Stacy. I'm from another dimension.
How many more spider people are there?
Hey, fellas.
Hello.
This could literally not get any weirder.
It can get weirder.
Okay. We need to get back to our universes soon.
Brooklyn is gonna collapse. My family lives in Brooklyn.
Whoa.
Miles, what's wrong?
This was never your city. It's mine.
If I don't destroy the collider, none of us will have a home to go home to.
Remember, what makes you different
Let's go.
is what makes you Spider-Man.
Officer, I love you.
Wait, what?
That way. Other way.
Do animals talk in this dimension? Because I don't want to freak them out.
Welcome back to the Cinema Club. Today I am joined by Tim and Tasha. Tim, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and also why you chose today's film?
My name is Tim McLean. I know Chris because we were both groomsmen in a good friend's wedding, and that's why I initially met Chris, and then our friendship started from there. My history with Into the Spider-Verse, I actually ended up seeing this in theaters because my younger sister dragged me to see it. She said, Tim, I keep hearing good things about this. I was like, why do I want to see this dumb animated Spider-Man movie? Why would I want to watch this? And I came out of that theater jaw-dropped like, oh my God, that was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Awesome. And what was making you interested in deep diving into today's film, Tim?
Well, I just saw the sequel, but I'm really high on these movies right now, so I figured now is the time to strike while the iron's hot. And plus, this movie is really freaking good. Like, really freaking good. So I think everybody in the world should watch this movie, whether you like superhero movies or not. I mean, hell, my oldest sister, who has had superhero burnout for the past, 6-7 years, loves this movie.
There you go. Awesome. And Tasha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Anastasia, or Tasha. I have known Christopher for so many years. We were introduced in homeschool co-op however many years ago in our very young teen years.
You were also both homeschooled.
Yes. And growing up, we'd always go see movies together and talk about them and, always talking about all that and into all the nerdy stuff together, which was always great. Gotta love
Absolutely.
nerdy friends. And yeah, it is pretty rare for me to like a movie to the point where I'm like, yeah, there's nothing I would change. And this movie is definitely one of those movies. So heck yeah to talking about fantastic movies who deserve every bit of recognition that they've gotten.
And just to be completely clear before we get any further, I want to give a big spoiler warning because we are going to be talking about anything and everything about the film. If you have not yet seen this movie, you're doing yourself a disservice by listening to this episode because you will be spoiled. However, if you are one of those people who just like spoilers, at least we did tell you, and welcome. So this animated film starts with Peter Parker, voiced by Chris Pine, introducing himself as we know him, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. By now, everybody knows how big he is, what with saving New York constantly, getting his own comics, cereal, and even a Christmas album. He does have some things he's not proud of, aka the emo dance for one, but he takes his duties as Spidey proudly, as he is the one and only. We meet Brooklyn teen Miles Morales, voiced by Shamik Moore, as he is getting ready to start attending a private school. He lives with his father, Jefferson, voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, and his mother, Rio, voiced by Luna Lauren Velez. Hope we're not mispronouncing too many of these names. Miles goes around his neighborhood greeting his friends and tagging street signs with stickers he made. Jefferson, a cop, catches Miles and escorts him to school in his cruiser. As they ride to the school, they see a news report on Spider-Man, whom Jeff is not a fan of. Once they arrive, Jeff tells Miles he loves him, but Miles fails to say it back. Jeff then uses his radio to force Miles in front of all the other students to say, "I love you" back, embarrassing him. Miles gets into his schoolwork as he tries to adjust to his new environment. During one of his classes, he meets Gwen Stacy, voiced by Haley Steinfeld, who doesn't immediately tell him who she is. Later, Miles sneaks out of his dorm to visit his uncle Aaron, voiced by Marshala Ali, who is Jefferson's brother and a sort of black sheep due to his criminal activities. Miles tells him about Gwen, and Aaron tells him to do a shoulder touch to try and charm her. The two then go to the tunnels near the subway so they can do some graffiti since Aaron is fond of Miles' artwork. As Miles spray paints the walls, a radioactive glitching spider crawls up his leg and bites his hand after Miles takes a picture of his work. But he only lightly taps the spider off his hand before leaving with Aaron.
My thoughts to start. The fact that we had trouble pronouncing everybody's names at the beginning is good because that means it's a very interracial cast. It's not predominantly white, and we need more of that in movies these days. With all the whitewashing that happens in comics and everything, having a racially diverse cast is a very good thing. So the fact that we're all having trouble pronouncing their names, thumbs up to that, and apologies if we mispronounce them. So
I'm liking that we're getting to meet Miles, typical teenager. He's like barely getting his stuff packed up for the week at school.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure we can all relate to that on some levels when we were younger and or sometimes still.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. I definitely have had my fair share of, oh, crap, I got to be at work in 10 minutes and get the heck out. So I felt that on a spiritual level. And it's always the brightest minds who are always the most disorganized, I've come to realize. Their brain is focusing on other things and they don't have time to organize themselves. Yeah,
we kind of see Miles, who is obviously a great student because he's at this private school. You know, he's running around from class to class. Like you said, like he's a brilliant person. And even like he's purposely trying to fail a test his teacher is assigning to him because he's that smart. And we're all introduced to who Miles is pretty quickly here. And he's given this report where he's like, hey, I got to write this paper on my purpose, who I want to be one day, which is overwhelming as a teenager to try and do.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know what I wanted to do at his age.
Yeah, because he's like, what, like 13?
14,
maybe?
I think.
Yeah.
I think they actively named him at like 14 or 15. He's between 14 and 16.
Okay.
That's what they actively aged him at.
Yeah. So not many of us know what we want to do at that age. So that's an overwhelming essay. And that's where I feel like this story does a really nice job of, you know, that whole sequence when Miles is creating that art in the tunnel. He's really expressing who he is, how he sees himself, how he wants to see himself in the future. I just loved how they blended all those sequences, you know, with the awesome soundtrack.
Yes. The soundtrack is one of the things I wanted to bring up. I don't listen to much hip hop, rap, or R&B. I am the stereotypical metalhead. I do nothing but listen to heavy metal and go to heavy metal shows. That's basically all I do in my free time when I'm not watching movies. All the music in this movie fits, especially during the graffiti sequence. Also, speaking of the graffiti sequence, while we're at it, now's as good of a time to mention as any. The animation style in this movie. Oh my God. That needs to have its own discussion point. So we need to get cracking on that. So now's as good of a time as any. Up until the graffiti sequence, when I first saw this, I was like, the animation in this isn't really that good. I'm not sure what the animators were thinking, but the reason why is because there's multiple animation styles in this movie. It's the base and it's very malleable, so you can lean into other animation styles. And I came to realize that later. But the graffiti sequence is the first indicator of the movie telling you, oh, you think you know what's coming. You have no idea what you're in for, at least in terms of visually what the movie wants to do.
Absolutely. One of the very first things, the first time I watched it, that just like blew my mind was like so many points throughout the movie, how perfectly we've got this blend of animation where it's, like a little more like CGI looking, a little more whatever, but it so much looks literally like a comic book. It's got the little lines for shading or the little dots, and at points too during the movie where like things that happen in the movie, like there'll be splatter on looking like it's on the screen,
Yeah.
Yes.
With like when he's doing the painting, or I think at one point when somebody gets punched, like stuff like that, where it's just,
or when Spider-Man eats a burger and ketchup splatters
cool
on the screen.
Yes, exactly. So cool, so creative. Not like anything that really has been out there before.
Yeah, because I mean, like you were kind of mentioning, Tim, it's like, oh, okay, another animated movie. And I feel like really industry-wide changed people's perspective on what animation could be.
This movie is an absolute game changer in terms of what animation can and should be. When the directors made this movie, they hired all of the artists. They had everything hand-drawn and computer animated so they could combine them at their will.
Which is crazy. That's a lot of work.
Insane.
Yeah, it is. And I don't remember what point during the movie it is, but there is a point, I read this online somewhere, that it took them a solid month to make 4 seconds of this movie. A freaking month for 4 seconds.
Bonkers.
Especially with how long it is. It's not a short movie.
No, it's 2 hours. Like you think animated kids movie, you think hour and a half, okay, sure. No, this is a full 2 hour movie.
All right, so moving on, the next day, Miles finds himself feeling differently. He hears a voice in his head, which is accompanied by comic-style text boxes. His clothes barely fit, and he is sweating profusely. He runs into Gwen, who tries to make up a fake name when they properly introduce themselves. Miles tries to do the shoulder touch, but he only gets his hand stuck on Gwen's shoulder and then her hair, leading them to have to go to the nurse for her to get her hair cut off. When Miles tries going back to his dorm, he is found by a security guard who calls him out for leaving his dorm. Miles runs and hides in the man's office, getting everything stuck to him as he keeps freaking out. He climbs out the window and finds himself walking on the walls before running into the streets, amazed by his newfound powers and abilities.
Okay, so at this point, with this interaction, it's one of the things I appreciate this movie is about its attention to detail. And it took me until like the third rewatch before I realized that Gwen has an eyebrow piercing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't see that in movies very often, especially animated movies. But like,
that's true.
It's a nice touch. And until I got an eyebrow piercing, I didn't really notice it. But like now, like I'm more aware of it since I have one when other people have eyebrow piercings. And it's the first time I've ever seen an animated movie where somebody has an eyebrow piercing. And I just think that's really cool. Like just as some random baloney weird thing that I noticed. Anyways.
You're like, hey, one of my people.
Exactly. That's exactly how I felt.
No, I mean, I like the introduction of Gwen as well. I also wanted to throw in here, it was Peter Ramsey's idea to hold off on the visual comic language, like the word bubbles and panels, etc., until Miles is actually bitten by the spider in the film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really nice touch because, like you were saying, Tasha, like it's a very comic booky feeling movie, and especially now with the visual comic language being integrated, that just really like pops off. And I think that really also, also really is showing us, inside Miles's head throughout the whole sequence of events we just talked about.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because as we were saying, we up until the spider bites him, and like the graffiti sequence, you're like, oh, this is just some other stereotypical animated movie and they just decided to throw Spider-Man's name on it. But now it feels like you're actually in a Spider-Man comic.
100%. And I also really liked that, I believe it's here, that they do the whole scene when Miles is like reading the Spider-Man comic while he's like experiencing his powers as he's getting those for himself.
I thought there could only be one Spider-Man. There's two.
Right. He's like, wait, how am I supposed to be Spider-Man? There's already a Spider-Man. Miles later goes to the tunnel where the spider bit him. As he examines it, it starts glitching again. Not long after, Miles hides as his spider sense detects danger. Spider-Man enters as he's being pursued by the Green Goblin. The fight takes them beneath Fisk Industries, where Wilson Fisk / Kingpin is attempting to start up a super collider. In the middle of Spidey fighting Goblin, he takes the time to get Miles out of harm's way. Spidey realizes Miles is just like him, just as a machine is turned on. Outside in the city, certain structures start to get weirdly morphed into other shapes. A blast occurs in the tunnel. Spidey is badly injured and Miles tries to help him, but Spidey tells him to hide before giving him a drive to shut down the collider. Kingpin, Goblin, and another villain, the Prowler, gather around Spidey and remove his mask. He begs Kingpin not to restart the collider, even telling him to think about his family. But this angers Kingpin and he kills Spider-Man by slamming his fists down onto him, which Miles watches in horror. He runs back home where his parents find him and he runs to hug Jefferson, his father. The news breaks out that Spider-Man is dead and that he was Peter Parker. New Yorkers everywhere are devastated. Miles buys a costume. The store owner is the voice of Stan Lee, no less, before attending a memorial service for Peter with many other fans attending dressed as the Wall Crawler. Mary Jane delivers a eulogy for her husband while Aunt May stands solemnly in the back.
Okay, this was one of the things on the first couple of rewatches that threw me for a loop. The Goblin is not looking like a Green Goblin I've ever seen. Now, I've never read any of the comics. I'm only familiar with the Spider-Man movies. I've seen I've seen every mainstream Spider-Man movie. I haven't seen like the 60s animated series or anything like that.
Sure.
But I'm not familiar with the comics. So if that's how he looks in the comics, that's kind of cool. But I'm used to the Willem Dafoe Green Goblin personally,
right,
or even the Dane DeHaan Green Goblin, and it looked nothing like those. So seeing like a big demon-looking thing, I thought was an interesting touch.
Yeah, I mean, it's different, right? Which I think this film touches on a lot of differences in great ways, and serves up characters that, hey, we're familiar with these characters if, you choose to watch or consume comic book stuff. But it takes its own little spin on things or inserts versions of characters, like you're saying, Tim, that are really unique and different. And I think that really, at least for me as an audience member, draws me in and makes me really interested in this version of a Spider-Man movie.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things too about because it's, dealing with this multiverse situation, like that they get to do that, be like, oh, so like this is something that but it's a different take on it, a different version. It's just a little off, and that just makes that so much more fun. All these little things that are just slightly different, that it's like, oh yeah, that's that, but it's not that, but it's that.
Something that I was kind of realizing on this rewatch for the podcast episode is we get to see Spider-Man be killed, which I think is really incredibly powerful. Growing up, I'd never seen Spider-Man die on screen before. So
yeah,
even though it's like another Spider-Man that's not the main Spider-Man, our Spider-Man, Miles, I think that it was really, incredibly powerful to see oh, your hero die on the screen.
Now that you mention it, you're right. I have never seen Spider-Man die either.
Yeah.
Especially since it takes place in the same universe as like the previous Spider-Man movies that we've come to know and love. It acknowledges the Amazing Spider-Man movies. It acknowledges the Sam Raimi trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it acknowledged Homecoming or not, but that's whatever. But so it takes place inside the same universe. And it says out with the old and in with the new, not quite that brash and grotesque, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I feel like it really emotionally kind of sets us in a similar place of Miles watching that, because that's been his Spider-Man, growing up, I'm assuming, for years. And
10 years.
10 years, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, wow, like my hero, my city's hero just died.
For sure. Something else I would like to touch on now that we've brought the Kingpin into this.
Yes.
I think Liev Schreiber is the Kingpin is my favorite voice casting in the movie. Like the voice acting in this movie is phenomenal, but Liev Schreiber as the Kingpin really did it for me.
I love this version of Kingpin, honestly. Because I think, I haven't read too many of the comics myself personally, to be totally transparent with you guys. But I do feel like it is like comic book accurate, where it's this huge hulking figure, this villain, right? I mean, he kills Spider-Man by just punching him. He's a villain to be feared. And I agree with you, Tim. Like, I really enjoyed Kingpin's design, and it wasn't only because of the tone or his size, but they really dived into his motivation really nicely here. I mean,
yes.
We really get to see fairly early in the film that they made it about his wife, Vanessa, and his kid. He went through this incredible loss, all this pain, and it's his driving motive, it is to be reunited with his loved ones, not to necessarily destroy the city or the world. Like, his whole motive is that he wants to be back with the people that he lost, largely because of his own actions. And I think that really sets him to be a great villain, where they could have gone another route and, went super basic.
For sure. Like, and he's super relatable in this instance too. Like, who doesn't want to be reunited with their loved ones?
Absolutely.
Except for maybe Gwen, but that's not really revealed yet. I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're good.
That's one of the things that I love too about this story, is because like such a big part of Spider-Man is, part of his origin story in all of these universes, or hers, is that they do experience loss of someone that is like super close to them, that is family, that is in their lives. And just the contrast of how the protagonist versus the antagonist, handles that, and like how they choose to handle that trauma, what path they go down after experiencing this kind of loss.
One other thing while we're at it, like, again, by us having to see Spider-Man die, and in addition to the Kingpin being relatable, that already tells you this is a different kind of Spider-Man movie. Once again, the directors and everybody else are saying this is a different Spider-Man movie. This is not what you're expecting. You don't know what's coming. And also, did you know that the Kingpin is actually Lord and Miller's favorite character in the movie?
I didn't know that. I can see why they put a lot of time into him now.
That's cool.
Little fun trivia for you. We would be, may Stan Lee rest in peace. We have to say that, of course. The directors specifically went out of their way to make sure he had a super important cameo that really embodied the spirit of Stan Lee in his cameo. Like, sure, he's had lots of cameos in all of his movies where he was a bus driver, or, hey, kid, why'd you take my hot dog? Or just some quick comedic quip stuff. Like the directors realized this might be his final cameo, so we need to make sure that it embodies his spirit and what he was trying to do when he created the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Raise a great point, Tim. The film came out in 2018, and it's easy to kind of look back and be like, oh, maybe they inserted him in later or something. No, this was his last appearance in a Marvel film. And something that's actually really cool, if you hit pause anytime a train goes by in the film, because all the animators wanted to animate Stan Lee, he's in almost every single train.
Oh my gosh. That's
it's super cool. It's super cool. Like, I was like watching the movie today, and I like paused it a few times, and he's in it. It's almost in every single train.
Oh my gosh.
Super cool. Because, they're all like going by so fast, you don't really see who's in there unless you pause it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's him.
Oh, yeah, no, this movie is a goldmine of pause, and there's a lot of stuff you didn't notice initially, or like if you play it in slow motion, fast forward in slow motion, you see a lot of stuff, especially when you're switching from multiverses. This movie is a goldmine for seeing imagery you didn't see otherwise.
It is. Even when I was watching it, my fiance was like in the room doing stuff, and he was like, wait, go back. And like rewound and paused, and he was like, "You see the poster? You see the poster?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're referencing," but it was like a like a movie poster for a movie that was like for like the sequel to the Shaun of the Dead movie, which was planned and never done. And like that's one of the posters when you are first introduced into Times Square.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like, of course you would notice that. But yeah, just like so cool. Just like another one of those like teeny little like, oh, multiverse nods, Like, oh yes, in this universe, that movie actually happened.
Also, in keeping with the Stan Lee cameo, when he tells Miles, eventually the suit will fit. He's telling him, major foreshadowing, eventually you will be Spider-Man. But I didn't realize that until just now. Like this movie is an absolute gold mine for setup and payoff.
It is. It really is, which is so delightful.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a rewatchable film? Honestly, I love little cameo hidden stuff or just Easter eggs in general. Like that stuff makes my day.
Same.
Miles is inspired by MJ's words to take up the mantle of Spider-Man. He wants to test out his powers, but he isn't quite sure of how to get them to work. He later pays a visit to Peter's grave, just as he is spotted by another man, Peter B. Parker, Jake Johnson. In his own words, this Peter tells us in his universe, he's been Spider-Man for years and is now an adult, but he's lost Aunt May, and he was married to Mary Jane, but is now divorced due to him not being able to work out his issues as Spidey, as well as him not wanting kids when she did. He became depressed and gained weight, and then the collider turned on, which pulled him into this dimension, now finding Miles. He gets knocked unconscious, leading Miles to try and swing with him as the police go after them, only to end up crashing on the streets as people walk past them. Miles brings Peter somewhere for safety. He questions Peter as to how it's possible that he's there alive when he correctly guesses the alternate dimension theory. Miles takes out the drive that Peter of his universe gave him, which other Peter calls a goober, but it's broken. Peter frees himself and takes the broken goober to try and find a new one so that he can get back home, as being in this dimension causes him to glitch and be unstable. However, before Peter can head off on his own, Miles guilts him into letting him join so that they can make things right together.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is.
Okay, where do we begin with that? Jake Johnson is also, again, solid voice casting as Peter B. Parker. I enjoyed that.
I love Jake Johnson, and I liked him a lot in New Girl, and he is absolutely great as Peter in this film.
He is. I feel like he captures the energy of him so well.
100%. I also really love the humor in this film. I feel like it's really well blended. I mean, a lot of serious stuff going on. Spider-Man just died. But I love that we see Miles reading the comic book again, the Spider-Man comic book. And we see the sequence in the comic book of Spider-Man taking that leap. And so Miles is like, okay, so he runs up all these flights of stairs to do this. And then turns around and goes to a lower level and then ultimately falls and injures himself. I just love that it's not too funny. It's not too serious. It's just a really great blend of both.
And the humorous moments land very well. They don't take away from any of the serious stuff. That has been a problem with more recent superhero movies, a la Thor: Love and Thunder, where the humorous moments all of a sudden, that wasn't quite placed where it should have been. And it kind of took away from the overall seriousness of what was going on.
Right. There weren't any goats in this film.
Oh, that damn goat. Okay, but yeah, also in regards to the humor blending and at the right moment, that whole train sequence where he can't get the web unstuck from himself to Peter B. Parker.
Yes.
I thought that was funny. Just the web hits the train, the kid just...
No, I agree. And it's really well done. It's blending, hey, like this has a purpose, but also it's very humorous.
But then when Peter B. Parker walks away with the roof and Miles guilts him into letting him tag along, like that is the moment. Okay, we have the teacher, we have the student. So we have the basic setup for the rest of the movie, so to speak. I thought that was a good introduction of doing that. I just like that whole sequence, honestly. It's just so good.
No, yeah. I mean, even like when they go to that burger joint, they're having a moment together. That bonding that we see later on in the film, it's starting, after he got drug around by Miles throughout the whole city.
Yeah, for sure. Also, it's important to note the place where Miles brought Peter was Uncle Aaron's apartment. That's important to note because that sets up Uncle Aaron's apartment as a safe space. Because it didn't occur to me until I watched him oh, that's the punching bag he was punching before they went and graffitied where he tied Peter up. So
that's really true. I didn't even catch that. I've watched this movie 2 times in the last 3 weeks and missed it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are just so many details. It is so easy to miss things. And that is another point where it's it is a very rewatchable movie because every time you watch it, you might notice something new that, you missed before, which is, again, so delightful.
Miles and Peter, dressed in their costumes, go to the lab where the data on the collider is being kept. Miles and Peter manage to sneak into the lab and find the room with the computer. Miles starts freaking out again as he can't unstick himself from the ceiling, just as Kingpin and his scientists are outside. Miles then also finds out he can turn invisible while he's scared. The scientist then enters the room, forcing Peter to try and charm her. She is impressed to find Spider-Man alive, but only so she can kill him herself. She then reveals her name to be Dr. Olivia Octavius, aka Doc Ock. She reveals her mechanical tentacles as she attacks Peter, but Miles grabs a computer so that they can go. They are chased by scientists out of the lab and into the woods. The guys swing through the trees as the villains catch up, but Doc Ock gets webbed by a third spider person, Gwen. She tells Miles and Peter how she too has come from another dimension where she was bitten by a spider. There, she saved her father's life but couldn't save Peter. The 3 of them then head out of the woods to get away. Doc Ock later goes back to Kingpin, who is highly displeased to find there are 2 more Spider-Men around.
One of the things also, I didn't realize that Doc Ock was voiced by Kathryn Hahn, who was Agatha on WandaVision. Totally did not realize that.
Oh, yeah.
Great villain.
Absolutely. I thought that the Doc Ock reveal was pretty good one. I genuinely did not see that coming at all.
Neither did I.
Indeed. Also fun to see a gender swapped Doc Ock.
Yes.
Yeah, that was partly why I was oh, wow. Yeah, it makes total sense. Never popped up in my head as that's who this character was, though, even though we've been introduced to her previously.
Also, just as a little teaser for you guys, right when they're sneaking into the lab through the ventilation shaft, all the lights in the room are octagon shaped.
Nice.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a little bit of a. I read that one online. I didn't actually get credit for that one, but that's a little teaser for you guys so you can see. Oh my God! Yep. I thought that a funny moment was when Doc Ock is interrogating Peter Parker when Miles is trying to get into the password. Miles is invisible, trying to figure out what's the dang last digit of the password.
Yeah, I mean, it is very high stakes in this whole sequence of events, but it's also hilarious. Even the entire process of all the scientists chasing Miles and Peter after they take that bagel is hilarious.
Yes.
Especially when Miles throws the bagel and it hits the scientist in the head, and the words "bagel" pop up on the screen.
Yes. So the good news is we don't need this monitor. Just tosses it.
Yes, exactly.
If you didn't notice, they actually end up running over Gwen in the lab when they're running away.
I didn't catch that.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Yeah. Gwen is in there. So they run her over and then all of a sudden focus and you turn around oh my God, that's Gwanda. But we don't know it's Gwen yet.
Right, Gwanda.
Yeah, Gwanda. Back to what we were saying about this movie really feeling like a comic book movie. That whole scene where the scientists are chasing them, shooting them with guns, it does not get any more comic booky than that. It sounded like a cartoon chase. It felt like a cartoon chase. That comic books are made of.
Right, because it's like their briefcases unfold into these plasma guns, right?
Yes, like straight out of a James Bond supervillain, cartoony. It just fit the movie so well. It was kind of corny, but that was the point, and it worked.
Yeah,
it did. It worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're kind of seeing the mentor-students relationship here. Peter says something like, "We're a little team. Me as a teacher who could still do it. You as a student who can do it, just not as good." They're having these bonding moments throughout this whole sequence, which is really fun to see happening. Miles, Peter, and Gwen go to Aunt May's home, where she's able to figure out that the Peter she sees before her is from another dimension. She takes them to her Peter's old secret hideout, which is full of different suits, gadgets, and vehicles. There, the three meet Spider-Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas Cage, a black and white old gangster talking hero, Peony Parker, voiced by Kimiko Glenn, and her robot, which is powered by a radioactive spider, and Peter Porker, aka Spider-Ham, voiced by John Mulaney, who was actually a spider bitten by a radioactive pig. All of them were pulled from their own dimensions and into Miles' world. They each plan to stay behind to shut down the collider with a new goober so that the rest can get home. But Miles says it has to be him, since this is his dimension. When Peter tries to back him up by stating the cool powers that Miles has, he is unable to turn them on and prove to the others that he is capable of helping. Miles turns invisible as he dejectedly leaves the cave. Miles then goes to Aaron's home for help, just as Jefferson and Rio are contacting Aaron since they haven't heard from Miles in a while. Miles finds Aaron's apartment empty, but then encounters Prowler inside, prompting him to go invisible again. Prowler speaks to Kingpin and removes his mask, revealing himself to be Aaron. Miles is horrified. He tries to get out of the apartment, but is chased by Aaron throughout the city until he manages to evade him.
First things first, when we get to the spider cave in Aunt May's backyard, Peter Porker is the best thing to ever be put into a Spider-Man, like a spider pig. Let's fucking go. I did not know how to react, but I love it. He is probably my favorite of the side characters because it's a pig, a spider pig. Like, it speaks for itself. It's just one giant joke. I love it.
Well, and they make so many jokes out of that as the film continues on.
And I thought that John Mulaney was a good voice. My second favorite character, voice acting character, was Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir, though, because it's Nicolas Cage, man. You can't go wrong with Nick Cage.
No.
Like,
you did such a good job.
Where's the wind coming from? The wind follows me wherever I go.
The perfect amount of like that dramatic, like, I'm gonna be all dark and broody and whatever. Like, he pulls it off so well, because Nicolas Cage goes hard.
It does not matter what Nicolas Cage does. He always goes hard. Like, he gives 10 out of 10 performance for whatever he does. Also, this is kind of one of the other areas that it took me a while to adjust to when I saw the movie in theaters, but having the different styles, because Penny Parker looks more like a Japanese anime, Spider-Man Noir looking more like he belonged in the 1930s film, which is the point. And then Peter Porker just looking like a pig, also with a different animation style, more like, not quite akin to the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon, but more in that vein. Like, now that I think about it, it's more of a teaser for the second movie as to what we're going to be experiencing. But like, having those three be very different animated styles, but still in Miles' universe, I thought was a very interesting juxtaposition, but I was all for it. And that's another area where I think that this is one of the best visually made movies of all time in that regard. Because by all means, the juxtaposition should not work, but it does.
Mm-hmm. Right. On paper, that concept sounds really stupid. Yeah, it does.
Also, before we continue, the Prowler reveal being Uncle Aaron, top tier shit right there. That tells you, right? That moment right there told me, oh, this movie's next level. I was not ready for that reveal. Now, I think it's the second best identity reveal in a Spider-Man movie. The Far From Home reveal where Michael Keaton is his girlfriend's dad was...
That was good.
That's the best reveal in a Spider-Man movie ever, like, bar none. But the Uncle Aaron Prowler reveal is just a touch below it. Like, my mind was like, wait, what?
Like, clicked. Yeah.
Clicked and like, oh man, this shit just got real. Like, that's where everything has hit the fan.
Yes, most definitely. Especially like as like his Uncle Aaron is kind of introduced as like, oh, this is an important man in his life. This is a like a figure for him that he looks up to, who you're like, oh, this maybe he's gonna be part of this whole mentoring thing too. Like that was like it felt like part of the expectation as you're introduced to his uncle. Like his uncle's he's the fun one. He's almost like the I wish you were my dad kind of a vibe,
Yeah.
And then boom, he's one of our main villains. it definitely hit hard.
Yeah. And again, Uncle Aaron's apartment had already been established as a safe space. So that's the writers betraying us saying, ha, just kidding. This is not a safe space at all.
And emotionally too, like the soundtrack, like just fuses you with like tension, and you're like, what the hell? And that whole chase that occurs then through the city, like with the audio and visually, like you said, Tim, it is like an oh shit moment, but they just carry that for like 3 solid minutes forward from there.
Like they don't allow you to move on right away. You have to live in the dread of that moment.
Yeah, you're totally experiencing what Miles is in that moment.
Absolutely.
So back at Aunt May's house, Miles reunites with the other spider people to tell them that his uncle is working for Kingpin. Unfortunately, Miles has led Prowler there, along with Doc Ock, Goblin, and Tombstone, and Scorpion. The villains attack, and the spider people spring into action. Even Aunt May gets in on it by defending her home. Prowler goes after Miles and chases him to the rooftop. Kingpin orders Prowler to finish Miles off until Miles takes off his mask to reveal himself to his uncle. Aaron is mortified that he almost killed his nephew. As he backs down, Kingpin shoots Aaron in the back and then goes for Miles. But he swings out of there with his uncle. He takes Aaron to an alley where he is dying. Miles blames himself for what happened, but Aaron encourages him to keep pushing forward. Jefferson finds Miles over Aaron's body, sending Miles fleeing. Jeff then sees his brother and breaks down. Miles returns to his dorm, where the other spider people meet up with him. They cause his roommate to pass out from seeing them crawl up the wall. Peter webs Miles up to his chair and takes the goober to go stop the collider, telling Miles it's for his safety. After they leave, Jeff comes up to Miles' dorm outside, but he can't respond thanks to the web. Jeff tells him about Aaron and only wishes for Miles to be okay. Miles then musters up his strength to bring out his power to free himself.
I told you to take this outside. I'm sorry. That was the moment of that entire sequence for me.
Aunt May's a badass.
Aunt May is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, as much as I love this movie, this entire scene is actually one of the things that I actually have to like criticize it a little bit for how much praising we've been doing.
Interesting. Okay.
At least in terms of what happens with the story. There's absolute chaos going on in the living room. Everybody's fighting everybody. But we're brought on, rightfully so, we're brought on to focus between Prowler and Miles. But then after Kingpin orders Uncle Aaron to shoot Miles, he doesn't, and then he shoots him, and then magically the fight just ends. And then we just move off. Peter runs away, but we don't know what happens with the rest of the fight because all the rest of the spider people are fighting the other villains, but we don't know what happens. Like, what's the conclusion of the fight? Who lived? Who died? Like, the fight just magically ends, and there's no reason for it to have ended, in my opinion.
It's interesting you bring that up. To rebuttal that, it's because they came there for the goober, and the goober's not there. So I think that the fight then dissipates on some level, and parties go their two separate ways because, the reason they're there left with Miles.
But then they should have all been chasing Miles, except he runs away unscathed and nobody's chasing him. So like, that's the one knock I have against this movie is I'm still having trouble getting over like that mental hump for that. But that's like the most minor complaints of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I probably just canonized in my head that the spider people held them all back, and
yeah,
this was like, oh yeah, well, my guy's got Miles now, so y'all can chill out. Then that didn't work out, obviously. So,
I mean, that's fair, I suppose. But again, it was
not in the movie in my head.
Oh yeah, fair. But that being said, though, that entire fight sequence is great because then you have 5-6 different animation styles going all at once, and it looks chaotic, but that's kind of the point because it's a chaotic fight.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
And I really enjoyed the hell out of that fight because of that. Like, the chaos is the point, and there's a lot going on, but again, that's the point. It's a very busy fight. Like, you don't know what's happening.
One of my favorite parts in that like sequence of things is when Miles does pull up his mask, and it just like one of those, cartoony things that can only happen in cartoon. where Prowler's mask changes and like you can read the emotion with like the way that his eye shape changes.
Yeah.
That it just like is just one of the things that I love about animation is when you know, like, because, you know, if it were a real mask, they'd have to do something more auditory or something, you know, for him to have that reaction, but that they're just able to visually do that. I like that just is one of those moments that just like seeing it change from this like very obviously like angry, evil mask to the concerned eyes, the way they like dip in and how like it looks like his brow is furrowing, you know, just like this, what, you know, this shocking moment for him where then he's trying to figure out what the heck to do because his boss is behind him telling him to kill this person and that's his job. But then that person is his nephew that he loves and adores and wants wonderful things for. So it's just like absolutely just like a favorite moment for me out of the whole movie.
I totally missed the changing of the eyes there. I'm definitely gonna have to look into that next time I watch this again.
Yeah, that whole sequence of that little event there is super intense because Miles is like standing on his tippy toes. His uncle's got him right there on the edge of the roof. And like you said, then that whole like realization happens for Uncle Aaron, and then he's just taken out by Kingpin.
Yeah, so sudden.
With a lot of superhero movies, like, oh yeah, if they get shot, it's okay. They're gonna be all right. You know, it's not the case here.
No,
Kingpin
this one
doesn't mess around.
No, he doesn't. Like, I mean, we already mentioned that we get multiple deaths. Like, that is very intense. It gives it that sense of realism of like, yeah, sometimes you know you get shot by a bullet and it's not like everything's all good at the end. The scene where they wake up in the hospital, you know, like. Right. We're not getting that with this one.
It's again kind of the event that makes Miles actually into Spider-Man. Like we've been seeing like little like tidbits of, is he going to actually become Spider-Man? This is his event that actually causes him to become Spider-Man. This is his, with great power comes great responsibility in a moment, this moment in his life. We would also be remiss if we didn't discuss the silent interaction between Miles' father and Miles sitting in the chair. I feel like we should expand upon that just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really powerful moment. I think you're bringing up a good point, Tim. The human moment.
Yes, the human moment. That's the perfect way to put it. Because like the superhero movies with all the superpowers, they're doing these things, they're defending everything, they can do anything, but can they talk to their own father? Which in this case, he physically couldn't, but I don't think he would have responded even if he could have. But in this case, he physically couldn't. But that still comes to show you that his parents still love him, and that's very important for still who Miles is. Like, we haven't discussed his relationship with his father that much yet, but it's a strained relationship. Miles is going through, rightfully so, going through a lot, but like, he's afraid to tell his dad.
Yeah, definitely a very complicated and nuanced relationship, which is another one of those things that like I feel like makes the movie very relatable, because that is such a teenage phase of life to go through where you're trying to find yourself and be your own person, but you're still that part of you, you know, that's like a kid that looks to your parents for guidance and who tells you what to do, and also rebelling against that, you know, like there's just like all these little things happening at once, and they collide and they clash against each other and contradict each other, but it's still such a real and very human experience.
Yeah, it's a raw moment, is I think what I would classify it as. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, something else that we need to discuss, the moment when all the spider people are on the ceiling. One, not only is that a fucking amazing shot, do animals talk in this universe? I don't want to freak him out, even though that's the last thing that he's going to be concerned about at that point. I just love that moment. That might be my favorite scene in the movie. Just all of a sudden, all of them are on the ceiling, like, I hope he doesn't notice. He looks up. Oh my. He just passes out because he can't handle the moment. After that, though, when Peter ties up Miles with the webs, that's the other tough love moment from teacher to student.
Big time. Yeah.
Big time. Like that's the motivation he needed. That's finally what gave him motivation to take the leap of faith, because we hadn't discussed that moment yet where, how did you know that you were Spider-Man? He goes, I didn't. I had to take a leap of faith. This is his leap of faith moment. And I felt triumphant when he finally was able to take that moment and like break out of the web.
He uses the electricity power.
Yes.
The venom strike, I think is what it's called.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. No worries. No worries.
Tim's got us, guys.
I'm a wealth of useless information.
Miles goes back to Aunt May's and gets the original Spider-Man suit, which he spray paints with dark colors. He then tests his powers more confidently as he swings around the city. The other spider people find Kingpin's gala, where they are able to sneak in because the staff are wearing Spidey masks. Peter sees MJ and tries to express his guilt toward leaving her, even though she doesn't know it's him or what he's talking about. They proceed down to where the collider is, but Kingpin's henchmen find them and proceed to attack. Miles swings in and joins his comrades as they fight back. To make things worse, the collider is activated, causing another earthquake across the city as dimensions start warping together. The henchmen are taken out and Doc Ock is plowed by an interdimensional truck. They say their farewells, and Penny goes first, followed by Noir and Spider-Ham. Gwen affirms her friendship with Miles before going home. Peter tried to stay back and help, but Miles chooses to send Peter back so that he can fix what he has to do in his world. Miles then goes after the collider, but Kingpin starts hitting back hard. He then starts to see a new Vanessa and Richard as their dimensions start crossing over. Just as Kingpin seems to overpower Miles, he sees Jefferson as he enters the area. Miles gets himself up and uses his power to blast Kingpin away, and then webs him up toward the button to shut down the collider for good.
That's a lot to unpack.
That is. Kind of tying into what we just talked about, the sequence when Miles frees himself and he takes the leap of faith. He's swinging in New York City. I just think is so beautiful. Made me really fall in love with this movie. It literally gives me chills every time I watch it with the What's Up Danger song in the background.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh.
Yeah. It just is so beautiful. And I love the video game, that PlayStation video game where you get to play as Miles, and that's all you do. You're swinging through New York City and it's beautiful. And it just reminds me of that experience playing the game so much. Again, we've talked about the animation and the soundtrack, but I think, again, this is a great example of those two things merging into something that's really special.
I think of, again, that's one of the things where it being an animated film comes into play, because you think about, there's all these times in movies where there's a really impactful moment that aligns perfectly with a sound in a song.
Yeah.
But we get that through whole song where there's all this he does this at the exact same time that this happens in the song, and that repeated sequence throughout that whole song. It's just so cool, and it just it makes it feel so much more of an immersive experience. It's all happening at once.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, super immersive. It's hitting the nail on the head again and again and again and again perfectly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Also, another favorite moment of the movie is when they're on the ceiling trying to figure out how to sneak in. They're like, it can't be that easy, can it?
Yes, that was so great.
Apparently it was that easy. I thought that was hysterical. Anyways, the fight that during the super collider, that entire sequence, my mom walked in on part of that sequence and she was like, wow, that's really cool animation, but you can't watch this movie if you're epileptic. My mom was an ER nurse for 40 years, so of course she's going to come to that conclusion. But that entire fight with the super collider going on is just one gigantic visual treat. It's impossible to fully process everything that's going on. That is rightfully so the climax of the movie, because the animation has never been cooler or more innovative. That entire sequence is the pinnacle of what game-changing animation can and should be at this point in what animation is.
Yeah, I think that's why rightly so won the award. Honestly.
Yes. Well deserved.
For sure. And also, back to what you were saying, Anastasia, there's no way in hell this movie could have been made in live action. There's no way.
No.
This is taking full advantage of animation and just running with it. And that sequence right there, up until the super collider bits, I think you probably could have made this movie live action, but the super collider would have been impossible to do.
Yeah, it definitely brings it to a level that nothing else would have been able to reach.
And it's really cool that we really truly get to see the three individuals' vision here unleashed, I feel in this whole fighting event.
It kind of feels like a a 7-year-old playing with their action figures.
Mhm.
It's that on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, where's your imagination at? Cool. Let's run with that.
Yes, like what is something you've always wanted to do with your Spider-Man action figure? Well, let's do this. Let's have this truck come out of nowhere. Boom! Like, that's what it felt like. And
Yeah.
I loved every second of it.
That's one of the things too that like I feel like this film just does so well. I've seen movies, where there is this like all of a sudden, boom, like that moment with Doc Ock where like, oh, she's just taken care of. Like that was just like an out of nowhere, that character's done with, that part is settled. And like there are so many where like they do that and it was like, oh, that was really anticlimactic, but they just did it so well. It felt so perfect. It fit in so well with everything else that was going on, like just another one of those things where I'm like, this is just such a well-made movie. So many things that they did fit so perfectly and flowed so well, even if they're using tropes, which I don't think they use that many, like they're doing it well and throwing in all this imaginative new things, just so well orchestrated.
And even with all this crazy shit going on, we still have those really human moments.
Yeah.
Like the one that comes to my mind here is when Miles drops Peter back into the portal to go home. Again, a really intimate part of the film for me because Peter's like, how do I know I'm not going to mess up again? And I think we all would have that thought. Like,
Absolutely.
oh, like I've gone from having this mindset where it's like, okay, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to sacrifice myself. And now I'm afraid, I'm scared to try and go back home because I'm afraid that I'm just going to fuck it up again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Miles constantly tells him, you won't, even though he knows he probably is going to, but he can't tell him that.
Right. He says something like, you got to take that leap of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Brings it back to that.
Yeah, and the human moment in this fight for me was when Kingpin looks like he's about to kill Miles, and then Jefferson looks at him and goes, "Come on, Spider-Man, get up, Spider-Man, get up." Now his dad is cheering for Spider-Man. What happened? Like,
that's true.
Like that was the emotional, raw, human moment for me. I'm like, oh my god, his dad's actually cheering for Spider-Man now.
Yeah, that's a very big moment.
My favorite cartoony moment was when Scorpion interacts with Peter Porker, and Peter Porker's like, "You got a problem with cartoons?" And then the angel just drops.
That is one of the things that, like, yeah, Peter Porker, very Looney Tunes vibes, or you like those older cartoons where it's just like the ridiculous little whatever. And even, like when he gives Miles his mallet and he's like, "Oh, it'll fit in your pocket." Like, yeah, like that's cartoon physics. You can just do that, It's just so delightful.
Spider-Man Noir going, "I don't know what this is, but I'm taking it back with me." With the Rubik's Cube.
The Rubik's Cube. Yes. Is this purple? No. Is this this? No.
Yes. In addition to that, I also really enjoyed Peter and MJ interaction a lot because, like, I think if Peter hadn't seen MJ, he probably would have stayed back and sacrificed himself so that way the rest could live on. But after seeing MJ again, he realized, okay, I actually miss her a lot. And that's actually, I think, the other aspect as to why he was able to jump back into his own dimension. If he hadn't seen MJ, I don't think he would have. And I think he would have stayed and just sacrificed himself because he came to realize how much he actually loved and missed her.
Yeah.
Gives him some motivation, something to live for,
Yes.
So outside, Miles calls Jeff to let him know he's okay. He then approaches him as Spider-Man and hugs him, letting him know he's doing a good job, but not letting his dad know who he really is. Jeff then finds Kingpin webbed up and prepped for arrest. Miles now assumes his regular school duties while also taking on his role as a new Spider-Man, earning a number of new fans across the city. Meanwhile, in Peter's dimension, he heads off to patch things with MJ. As Miles settles in his room for a nap, a dimensional portal opens and he hears Gwen's voice calling to him. There is then a dedication in the closing credits to Spider-Man creators Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, who passed away in 2018. And there's an image of Stan Lee's glasses with a quote that says, "That person who helps others simply because it should or must be done and because it is the right thing to do is indeed without a doubt a real superhero." Indeed. Also, closing credits, there's a scene where Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, yeah, who's voiced by Oscar Isaac, learns about the other Spider people from his assistant Lila, and he travels to Earth 67, where he ends up in a weird pointing argument with a Spider-Man some 1960s cartoon.
Yes. Recreating that meme was the best thing this movie did. Like, I'm glad we're covering this scene in this podcast because I was going to bring it up.
Awesome. Good.
Okay, but that is actually one of my favorite post-credit scenes ever. It felt very Marvel-y. Like, we've become accustomed to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You got to stay at the end of the credits because there's going to be something happening. I was just like, in the theater, I'm like, okay, what the hell was that? Then I rewatched it again before. I'm like, okay, that's a post-credit scene, but what the hell was that? Then I watched it the day before I saw the new one in theaters. I'm like, okay, but what the hell was that? Then I saw the new one in theaters. I'm like, okay. So then when I rewatched it today, in preparation for the podcast, I'm like, holy shit, that post-credit scene makes so much sense now. Like, talk about setting up your next movie. Oh my God.
I mean,
Tasha,
can't really get into that,
the new movie yet?
I have not yet. That is probably happening this week.
Good, because the post-credit scene is going to make so much more sense after you watch the movie. Okay, so we're just going to leave it at that. Anyways, I feel like the scene where Miles hugs his dad, but as Spider-Man, is the scene we needed because it allows his dad to kind of accept Spider-Man as, okay, Spider-Man's not all bad, but it also allows Miles to embrace both of his identities, both as Miles and as Spider-Man, to still have a relationship with his dad.
Yeah.
I like that.
I really liked that a lot. I also thought the interaction between Miles and his roommate was kind of fun. He just drops down like they were about to recreate the upside down kiss, but it's not.
Handshake.
Handshake.
Just bros being bros.
Indeed. The wholesome boys will be boys.
Yes, exactly. You read that quote from Stanley that's in the credit scene. I just feel like that was Stanley's whole thing with Spider-Man, was just like that he literally could be anybody, like he could be any one of us. And that like is, like such a recurring theme with all the Spider-Man stories. Like he's just a kid from New York, That's one of the things that I just so super love about this movie too is, sure, they're all like different versions of each other, but they're still all different people. And like, it's still giving you that picture of literally anyone can be the person that's making a difference, that's being a hero, that's, all those things. It just like absolutely so well honed in on that theme throughout all of it.
Yeah. And again, tying back to Spider-Man's funeral, Mary Jane flat out said, Peter believed literally anybody could be the mask. Anybody could put on that mask and wear it. And again, that embodies everything Stan Lee stood for.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I liked that this film focuses more on Miles and Gwen's respective introductions as separate characters. The romance subplot is like slightly hinted at here and there, maybe. But I'm glad that they chose to kind of scrap that from this film, and instead it's explored a bit more in the sequel.
Yes. Again, at the end, before Gwen enters her universe, Peter says friends, and she says friends, and they shake hands on it. Like, right. I thought that was super important because I feel like we need more movies these days where we have friends who are platonic. They could easily be a romantic relationship, but they need to stay platonic because it's too cliche in movies these days to just all of a sudden have them fall in love and become a couple. We need more of, okay, no, you don't need to become a couple. We can stay just friends. And again, back to subverting expectations. That is what this entire movie is about and what it does. And again, I appreciated the hell out of that.
You said that way better than I was going to say it, Tim.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's actually kind of funny that it started out with him having a crush on Gwen. They ended up as just friends because at the beginning he was just like, put the hand on the shoulder. Hey. And the movie ends with them just friends. So,
But yeah, with that being said, now's the part of the podcast where I want to hear what everyone's personal thoughts / reviews were for the film. So Tasha, go ahead and start us off here.
Like I said at the beginning, like it's one of those few movies where I don't have a single complaint against it. It hones in on so many things, on like good feelings, on even like we were just talking about, like platonic relationships, like that community connection, family. It hones in on all those things and also is like, and it's inspiring. Like, again, like we were just saying, like that anybody can be a hero. It's all about the choices that you make and the way that you choose to handle the things that happen in life, and all that along with all of the beautiful imagery and the wonderful sounds and just all the things. It just is so wonderfully done. All pieces that went into it, just cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah, I happen to agree with all that. Like I said, I listed my one complaint, finger quotes, complaint with this movie earlier. But other than that, I don't have any other complaints with the movie. Everything is just so well done. The characters are impressively developed. The story flows nicely. There's not one point in this movie where it drags. Everything flows nicely. It looks better than damn near every other animated movie on the planet, which still blows my mind. Everybody should see this film at least once.
Yes, agreed.
I think you both said it really well. Like, it's a really special film. It's definitely a game changer in the film industry, specifically, you know, with animation, especially now looking back. That came out like end of 2018. And I think we've already seen some of the effects that this film has had on the film industry a little bit, you know, when it comes to animation. Like, hey, like we can really up the game here. And so, yeah, again, great film. Love the film. I've watched it 2 times the last 3 weeks and still love it. I'm really glad that we got to dive into it today. And thank you, Tim, for bringing this one up.
Yeah. In addition to that, not only did it have an effect on like animated movies since then, but it also had an effect on like just the Marvel movies in general, because the most recent live action Spider-Man, this was loosely based off of this film. They took the idea from that and for that film from this movie. So it has effects other ways too. And also, since this movie came out, we've had Multiverse of Madness. We've had Everyone, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I probably mispronounced that movie, but you know what movie I'm talking about.
Yes.
And now it doesn't seem like the multiverse is like the hot new idea that everybody's trying to capitalize on right now. Like, we've had 100%. So many multiverse movies since this one has come out.
Yeah.
I did want to ask if people want to hit you up or see what you're doing these days. People can do that.
I am on Instagram. My handle is Timinator4434. I may or may not have been super obsessed with the Terminator movies in high school. So that may have become my handle for my social media. But anyways, Timinator 4434. That's both my Instagram and my Twitter. Feel free to follow me. I don't do much on Twitter, but on Instagram, I'll occasionally post cute animal videos on my story, and I'll post like pictures of the concerts I've been at.
And you see a lot of concerts.
I do. It's a problem. I'm actually going to be going on like a month-long hiatus from concerts, so that's going to be kind of weird.
Yeah, a month. He's usually there like what, every week? Every other week?
Last month I went to like 15. It was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Otherwise, yeah, feel free to follow me on Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active.
And what about you, Tasha?
I would say probably Instagram for me too. That would be where I would have the most publicly available, because most of my other stuff I keep pretty locked down. But my Instagram is Anarae95, so it's just ANARAE95. And yeah, that's basically it. I just post pictures of myself in cute outfits and my animals, who I adore endlessly. They are my life. My dog and my cat, Dudley and Ripley.
Was Ripley based off of Aliens?
Partially, yeah. There were a couple other influences, but Aliens was definitely part of it. Aliens was absolutely part of it.
A woman of culture, I see.
Absolutely, yes. I actually have a xenomorph head over on the wall over there. And then our dog, Dudley, is actually Dudley Do-Right Moore. Both named after Dudley Do-Right and Dudley Moore.
Yes. That is a very underappreciated Brendan Fraser movie.
Awesome.
Yes.
Also, while we're still here, all three of us can agree, when we're ready for it, we need to do the sequel.
Oh, yeah.
Heck yeah.
Okay. I'm glad we're in agreement.
If you want to hit me up, you can hit me up on Facebook on the Cinema Club group there. You can join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC, and listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review on iTunes. It will really help us reach more listeners and invite even more new members to the club. Message me or Nick on Facebook if you'd like to be on the podcast. I also want to say, finally, we are completely supported by you, our listeners. So if you're loving the show and are feeling generous, please consider clicking the support button on our website. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club. Thanks so much, and we will see you on the next one.